You don't belong here. Economy is back there, sweetheart." Those were the words Captain Richard Sterling shouted across a crowded gate at JFK Airport, pointing a finger at a woman who was simply trying to board her flight. He thought he was protecting the prestige of his airline. He thought he was putting someone in their place. He didn't know that the woman in the hoodie, standing quietly with a boarding pass in her hand, wasn't just a passenger. She was the woman who had just signed the ink on the merger that saved his airline from bankruptcy. She didn't just pay his salary, she owned the very plane he was about to fly, and in less than 3 hours, Captain Sterling wouldn't just lose his pride, he was going to lose everything. This is the story of how arrogance crashed harder than any plane ever could. The fluorescent lights of John F. Kennedy International Airport, Terminal 4, hummed with that specific frequency that only exhausted travelers can hear. It was 6:45 a.m. The air smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. Vivian Banks adjusted the strap of her worn-out leather tote bag on her shoulder. She was tired, bone tired. It had been a 72-hour week in London, negotiating the final clauses of a deal that the press didn't know about yet. The acquisition of Horizon Apex Airlines by her private equity firm, Obsidian Capital, was the kind of deal that made careers or ended them. Vivian had made sure it was the former. She wasn't dressed like a woman who controlled a portfolio worth $3 billion. She was dressed like a woman who wanted to sleep for the next 8 hours. She wore a charcoal grey oversized hoodie, black leggings, and a pair of comfortable, slightly scuffed sneakers. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she wore zero makeup. To the untrained eye, she looked like a college student heading home for the holidays, or perhaps someone who had just rolled out of bed to catch a standby flight. She approached gate B32. The sign above the desk flashed, Flight 881 to Los Angeles, boarding soon. There were 2 lanes. The one on the right was already snaking back toward the food court, filled with hundreds of economy passengers shifting their weight and checking their phones. The lane on the left, marked First Class, Diamond Premier, was empty, save for a pristine red carpet. Vivian stepped onto the red carpet. She just wanted to sit down. She wanted a glass of sparkling water, a warm towel, and silence. As she walked toward the podium, she pulled her phone out to pull up her digital boarding pass. "Excuse me, hey, you!" The voice was booming, baritone, and laced with immediate irritation. Vivian didn't look up at first. She assumed someone had dropped something. She kept walking. "I am talking to you. The girl in the sweatshirt." Vivian stopped. She turned slowly, standing near the jet bridge door, holding a coffee cup from a high-end roaster and wearing the crisp, navy blue uniform of a Horizon Apex captain, was Richard Sterling. Captain Sterling was a man who looked like he had been cast in a movie about pilots from the 1970s. He had silver hair coiffed to perfection, a jawline that had softened with age, but was still held high with arrogance, and 4 gold stripes on his shoulders that caught the light. He looked like authority. He looked like power. And right now, he was looking at Vivian like she was a stain on his carpet. "Can I help you?" Vivian asked, her voice calm, though her throat was dry. Sterling took a step forward, invading her personal space, just enough to be intimidating. He gestured vaguely at her outfit. "You're in the wrong lane, miss. Economy boarding hasn't started yet. You need to wait with the others." Vivian blinked. She looked at the sign that said, First Class. She looked back at him. "I'm in the right place," she said simply, turning back to the podium where the gate agent was typing furiously, avoiding eye contact with the scene unfolding. "No, you're not," Sterling snapped. He moved to block her path to the scanner. He was tall, well over 6 feet, looming over her. This lane is for Diamond Premier members and first-class passengers. It's for people who have paid a premium for priority service. It is not for—" He looked her up and down, his lip curling slightly. "Standby passengers trying to sneak on early to find bin space." Vivian felt that familiar heat rise in her chest. It wasn't the first time she'd been stopped. It wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated because of her skin color, her gender, or her clothes. But today? Today she was too tired for this game. "I'm not standby," Vivian said, keeping her voice level. "I'm in seat 1A. Sterling laughed. It was a short, barking sound. "Seat 1A. Do you know who usually sits in 1A? Senators. CEOs. Not—" He gestured at her hoodie again. "Not you. Now, do yourself a favor and get back in the line before I have security escort you to the back of the line." The economy line had gone quiet. 100 pairs of eyes were now watching. Vivian could feel the weight of their stares. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked annoyed that she was holding things up. "Captain," Vivian said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "I suggest you check the manifest before you continue this conversation." "I don't need to check a manifest to know a liar when I see one," Sterling spat. "I've been flying for 30 years. I know what our first-class clientele looks like. And they don't look like they just came from a gym class." The silence at gate B32 was deafening. Even the gate agent, a young woman named Sarah, whose name tag shook slightly against her blouse, had stopped typing. She looked terrified. She knew who Captain Sterling was. Everyone at Horizon Apex knew Sterling. He was the senior-most pilot on the LAX route, a man who bragged about his golf handicap and his connections with the union reps. He was untouchable, and he knew it. Vivian took a deep breath. She reached out with her phone toward the scanner. "I'm going to board this plane, Captain." Sterling reached out and put his hand over the scanner, physically blocking her. The gasp from the crowd was audible. A passenger in the economy line, a young man filming with his phone, whispered, "No way. You are not boarding my aircraft until you learn some respect for the rules," Sterling said, his face reddening. "You think because the world is getting woke, you can just walk wherever you want? Not on my watch. This is a disciplined environment. We have standards." Vivian stared at his hand, covering the scanner. She looked up into his blue eyes, which were hard as flint. "Remove your hand," Vivian said. "Or what?" Sterling challenged. "You'll call your boyfriend to complain? You'll write a tweet?" He leaned in closer, lowering his voice so only she and the gate agent could hear. "I can have you placed on the no-fly list for disrupting a flight crew member. That's a federal offense. Is that what you want? Do you want to go to jail today, or do you want to go to the back of the line where you belong?" Vivian tightened her grip on her phone. She could end this right now. She could pull up her email, show him the correspondence with the board of directors. She could say the words, "I own you." But something stopped her. If she revealed herself now, he would backpedal. He would apologize, not because he was sorry, but because he was afraid. He would fawn over her, get her a drink, and treat her like royalty, all while hating her secretly. No. That wasn't enough. She needed to see how far he would go. She needed to see exactly what kind of man was flying her planes. She needed to let him dig the hole so deep that no ladder could get him out. Vivian took a step back. She held her hands up in a surrender motion. "Fine," she said softly. "You win, Captain. I'll wait." Sterling smirked. It was a victory grin, ugly and self-satisfied. He removed his hand from the scanner and brushed off his uniform jacket, as if her proximity had dirtied him. "That's what I thought. Smart choice. Now move along." He turned to the crowd in the economy line, raising his voice again, performing for an audience. "Folks, we appreciate your patience. We just want to make sure that those who paid for their premium seats get the exclusivity they deserve. We don't cut corners at Horizon Apex." A few people in the line, mostly older men in suits, nodded in agreement with him. "Good for him," their faces said, keeping out the riffraff. Vivian walked away from the red carpet. She didn't go to the back of the economy line, though. She walked over to a quiet corner near the window, sat down on one of the metal chairs, and unlocked her phone. She didn't open Twitter. She didn't text a boyfriend. She opened the Obsidian Capital Secure executive portal. She navigated to the personnel directory for Horizon Apex Airlines, which had been fully integrated into her system as of midnight last night. She typed in, "Sterling, Richard." His file popped up. Status, Senior Captain. Base, LAX. Salary, $285,000 a year. Disciplinary record, 3 complaints in the last 2 years, dismissed by union rep. Retirement eligibility, 18 months. Vivian's eyes narrowed. He was close to a full pension. He thought he was coasting to the finish line. She scrolled down to the operational hierarchy. Currently, the chief pilot reported to the VP of Operations, who reported to the CEO. And as of this morning, the CEO reported to the chairperson of the board. Vivian tapped the message icon. She didn't message the CEO. She messaged David Thorne, the VP of Flight Operations, a man she had interviewed personally during the due diligence phase. "David," she typed, "I'm at JFK Gate B32. I need you to watch the live stream of the boarding process for Flight 881 if there is a security camera feed. Do not intervene yet. Just watch, and have the LAX station manager meet the plane upon arrival. I want a full formal review board assembled at 14 or so hours today in the LAX conference room." She hit send. Then she waited. 10 minutes later, the gate agent, Sarah, picked up the microphone. Her voice was trembling. "We would now like to invite our remaining first-class passengers to board." Sarah looked directly at Vivian across the waiting area. Her eyes were pleading. "Please come back," she seemed to be saying. "I know you have a ticket." Vivian stood up. She didn't rush. She walked back to the red carpet. Captain Sterling was still there. He was chatting with a wealthy-looking couple, laughing about a golf tournament. When he saw Vivian return, his smile vanished. "I thought I told you." "You told me to wait until the paying customers boarded," Vivian interrupted, holding up her phone. "I waited." She slammed her phone onto the scanner before he could block it. Beep! The machine flashed green. A small printer whirred and spat out a slip of paper. "Seat 1A. Status VIP." Sterling stared at the machine. He looked at the screen. It displayed her name, Banks, Vivian. He frowned. The name meant nothing to him. He didn't read the financial news. He just flew the planes. "There must be a glitch," Sterling muttered. He snatched the paper slip. "How did you get this? Did you use miles? Employee pass?" "It's a paid ticket, Captain," Vivian said, stepping past him. "And you're blocking the jet bridge." Sterling grabbed her arm. It was a light touch, but it was there. He put his hand on her bicep to stop her. The world seemed to freeze. Vivian looked at his hand on her arm. She looked up at him. This time there was no fear in her eyes. There was only the cold, hard calculation of a predator looking at prey. "Take your hand off me," she whispered. "Right. Now." Sterling realized he had crossed a line. Touching a passenger was a strict violation unless there was an immediate safety threat. He let go, but he sneered to save face. "I'll be watching you," he hissed. "One toe out of line, one loud noise, and we divert to Denver and I have you thrown off. You hear me?" "I hear you loud and clear, Captain," Vivian said. "I look forward to the flight." She turned and walked down the jet bridge. As she entered the plane, The lead flight attendant, a kind-looking woman named Maria, greeted her. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Banks. Can I take your coat?" "No, thank you," Vivian said. She settled into seat 1A. The seat was wide, leather, and comfortable. Through the cockpit door, which was still open, she could hear Sterling talking to his co-pilot, a younger man. "Can you believe the garbage they let up front these days?" Sterling was saying, his voice carrying clearly. "Ghetto hood rat gets a lucky upgrade and thinks she owns the place. Ruins the whole atmosphere for the real customers." Vivian pulled out her phone. She started a voice memo. "Record." "Tell me more, Captain," she whispered to herself. The seatbelt sign pinged off at 30,000 feet, but the tension in the cabin remained thick enough to cut with a knife. Captain Sterling's voice crackled over the intercom. "Usually, a pilot's welcome is routine: weather, arrival time, altitude." But Sterling couldn't help himself. He was still fuming, his ego bruised by the girl in 1A who had dared to challenge him. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude. We have a smooth ride ahead to Los Angeles. I want to give a special welcome to our Diamond Premier members today. We know you have a choice in airlines, and we appreciate you choosing a carrier that values tradition, class, and upholding the standards you expect. We try our best to keep the environment exclusive for you." It was a dog whistle, loud and clear. Across the aisle in seat 1B, an older man in a bespoke suit, Mr. Henderson, a frequent flyer Vivian recognized from industry galas, chuckled and shook his head, looking over at Vivian with a sympathetic grimace. He clearly found the captain's tone bizarre, but Sterling, locked in his cockpit, thought he was being subtle. Vivian didn't react. She pulled her laptop from her bag. It was a sleek, unbranded machine with military-grade encryption. She opened a spreadsheet titled Asset Liquidation and Personnel Restructuring, Horizon Apex. She began to type. Half an hour into the flight, the cockpit door opened. It was common for pilots to take a bathroom break or stretch their legs on long flights, but Sterling walked out with the swagger of a sheriff entering a saloon. He adjusted his tie and scanned the first-class cabin. He made a beeline for Mr. Henderson in 1B. "Senator Henderson," Sterling beamed, extending a hand. "Good to see you again, sir. How was the golf in D.C.? "It's just Mr. Henderson now, Richard, but good to see you," the man replied politely, though he seemed uncomfortable with the loud display. "Nonsense. You're always a VIP to us," Sterling said loudly. He then turned his back deliberately to Vivian, his hip inches from her face as he leaned over to chat with Henderson. "Maria is taking good care of you. Let me know if you need anything. Anything at all." He spent 5 minutes chatting up the passengers in 1C and 1D. He ignored Vivian completely. It was a childish display of shunning, intended to make her feel invisible. Finally, he turned to go back to the cockpit. As he passed Vivian, he stopped. He looked down at her tray table. Vivian was sipping a ginger ale. "You need to put that coaster under your glass," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "We don't want water rings on the leather. This equipment is expensive. Try to treat it with respect, even if you're not used to it." Vivian slowly looked up from her screen. She hadn't spilled a drop. Her glass was already on a linen napkin. "The glass is on a napkin, Captain," she said. "Don't talk back to me," Sterling snapped. "And lower your window shade. The glare is bothering Mr. Henderson." "It's fine, really," Mr. Henderson interjected from across the aisle. "I like the light." Sterling ignored the passenger he was supposedly protecting. "It's policy," he lied to Vivian. "Lower it. Now!" Vivian reached over and lowered the shade halfway. "All the way," Sterling commanded. Vivian closed it fully. Darkness filled her row. "Good," Sterling sneered. "Learn your place." He turned and marched back into the cockpit, slamming the door harder than necessary. Vivian turned back to her laptop. She switched tabs to her email and composed a new message to David Thorne, the VP of Operations. Subject: Incident Report, Flight 881. Add to the review board file. Captain Sterling has now harassed a passenger 3 times. He has fabricated safety policies to enforce dominance. He is currently neglecting flight monitoring duties to socialize and intimidate passengers. Proceed with the plan. The twist didn't happen in the cabin. It happened in the galley, and then in the cockpit. Maria, the lead flight attendant, was preparing the meal service when her personal phone buzzed in her apron pocket. Technically, she wasn't supposed to check it, but she saw a breaking news notification from the Wall Street Journal. Breaking. Obsidian Capital completes hostile takeover of Horizon Apex. Vivian Banks appointed new chairwoman. Maria stared at the tiny thumbnail photo in the article. It was a professional headshot, a woman in a power suit with her hair blown out, but the eyes were unmistakable. Maria's heart stopped. She looked at her printed passenger manifest. Seat 1A. Banks. Vivian. "Oh my God," Maria whispered. She looked through the curtain. The woman in the hoodie, the one Captain Sterling had been treating like a criminal, was the new owner of the airline. She wasn't just a VIP, she was the boss. The big boss. Maria felt a wave of panic. She had to warn him. Sterling was an arse, but he was about to walk into a propeller blade. Maria knocked on the cockpit door and entered. Sterling and his co-pilot, a younger man named Kevin, who looked terrified of Sterling, were drinking coffee. "What is it, Maria? I'm busy," Sterling grunted. "Captain, I need to talk to you about the passenger in 1A, Maria said, her voice trembling. Sterling rolled his eyes. "What did she do now? Take her shoes off? Put her feet on the bulkhead? I swear I'm going to have law enforcement meet us at the gate. In fact, Kevin, call dispatch. Tell them we have a disruptive passenger. Level 1 threat." "No, Captain. Please listen." Maria stepped closer, lowering her voice. "She's not disruptive. I just saw the news. The merger went through this morning." "So? What does that have to do with the hood rat in 1A? "Captain, look at the manifest name again," Maria pleaded. "That's Vivian Banks. She's the CEO of Obsidian Capital. She just bought the airline. She owns us." Sterling stared at Maria. Then he started to laugh. It was a cruel, incredulous laugh. "Her? You think that little girl in the sweatshirt is a billionaire financier?" He shook his head, wiping a tear from his eye. "Maria, you're gullible. That's probably a common name. Or she's a relative. Or maybe she stole a credit card. People like Vivian Banks don't fly commercial, and if they do, they don't dress like they're going to a laundromat." "But Captain, the resemblance—" "Get out!" Sterling said, his amusement turning back to anger. "Get back to the cabin and serve the meal. And don't give 1A the prime rib. Tell her we ran out. Give her the pasta. Let's see if she complains." "Captain, I really think you should—" "I said get out!" Sterling roared. "I am the captain of this vessel. Do not question my judgment." Maria backed out of the cockpit, her face pale. She had tried. Inside the cockpit, the A-CARS printer, the text messaging system for pilots, buzzed. A message printed out from HQ. "To Capt. Sterling, FLT 881. From Operations Control. Message: VIP status confirmed on board. Request priority. Handling. Extreme discretion advised. New ownership monitoring flight OPS." Sterling read the slip of paper. He smirked and handed it to Kevin. "See," Sterling said. "They're talking about Henderson, the senator. They want to make sure the new owners know we treat our best politicians well." "Are you sure, Captain?" Kevin asked nervously. It says new ownership monitoring. Exactly, Sterling said, completely misinterpreting the text due to his own bias. The new owners are monitoring how we treat the real VIPs. If I let that girl run wild, I look weak. But if I show that I maintain order and protect men like Henderson, that puts me in line for a promotion to chief pilot. Sterling grabbed the radio mic. Dispatch, this is Flight 881. Confirming request for law enforcement at the gate upon arrival at LAX. Passenger in 1A is refusing crew instructions and exhibiting hostile behavior. I want her escorted off immediately. Copy that, 881. Police will be waiting. Sterling sat back, satisfied. He thought he was securing his legacy. In the cabin, Vivian's laptop pinged. She had access to the cockpit communications feed through the executive override. She heard the request for police. She didn't get angry. A slow, cold smile spread across her face. She typed one final message to David Thorne. He just called the police on me. Let them come. In fact, make sure the press is there too. Let's make this a learning moment for the entire industry. She closed her laptop, reclined her seat, and waited for the landing. The trap was set, and the mouse had just snapped the bar down on his own neck. The descent into Los Angeles was smooth, the kind of landing pilots usually pride themselves on. The wheels of the Boeing 737 kissed the tarmac at LAX at exactly 11:42 a.m., but inside the cabin, the atmosphere was anything but smooth. Captain Sterling taxied the aircraft toward Terminal 4, but instead of pulling directly into the gate, he stopped the plane about 50 yards short. The engines whined down to a low idle. The fasten seatbelt sign remained illuminated. Sterling picked up the receiver for the public address system. His voice boomed through the cabin, sounding grave and authoritative. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. You may have noticed we've stopped short of the gate. We have a bit of a situation on board involving a security concern in the first-class cabin. I've asked airport police to meet the aircraft to escort a non-compliant passenger off the plane before we allow general disembarkation. I apologize to the rest of you for the delay, but at Horizon Apex, the safety and comfort of our respectful, rule-abiding passengers is my #1 priority. We'll have this sorted in a jiffy. A ripple of murmurs went through the plane. In economy, people craned their necks, trying to see who the threat was. In first class, every pair of eyes turned to seat 1A. Vivian didn't shrink. She didn't pull her hoodie up. She simply closed her laptop, placed it in her bag, and folded her hands in her lap. She looked serene, almost bored. Mr. Henderson, across the aisle, leaned over. "Miss, I don't know what his problem is," he whispered, looking genuinely concerned. "If you need a witness, I'll stay. He's been riding you since New York. It's harassment." Vivian smiled at him, a genuine, warm smile. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson. That's very kind. But I don't think that will be necessary. Just watch." The plane lurched forward again, finally docking at the gate. The bell chimed. Usually, there is a rush of people standing up to grab bags. Today, nobody moved. The drama was too high. They waited. The main cabin door opened. 2 uniformed Los Angeles airport police officers boarded, their hands resting near their belts. Behind them walked a third man. Not a cop. He was wearing a sharp grey suit, a blue tie, and an ID badge that read Executive Access. This was David Thorne, the VP of Flight Operations. He looked pale. Captain Sterling burst out of the cockpit, eager to manage the show. He adjusted his hat and pointed an accusing finger directly at Vivian. "Officers, right here!" Sterling barked, stepping into the aisle to clear a path. "Seat 1A, refused crew instructions, exhibited hostile behavior, and I have reason to believe she fraudulently obtained her ticket. I want her removed and charged with interference with a flight crew." The first-class cabin held its breath. Vivian remained seated. She looked at the officers. She looked at David Thorne. One of the officers, a burly sergeant named Miller, stepped past Sterling. He didn't pull out handcuffs. He didn't reach for Vivian's arm. Instead, he consulted a clipboard he was holding. He looked at Vivian, then at the photo on his clipboard, then back at Vivian. "Miss Banks?" Sergeant Miller asked. His tone wasn't accusing. It was respectful. "Yes, Sergeant," Vivian said calmly. "We received a call from your corporate security team," Miller said, ignoring Sterling completely. "They informed us of a potential hostage situation involving the flight crew. We're here to secure the asset." Sterling's jaw dropped. "Hostage? Asset? What are you talking about? She's the suspect. I called you." "Quiet, Captain," the second officer snapped, holding up a hand. David Thorne stepped forward. He was sweating. He looked at Vivian with the eyes of a man who knew his own job was hanging by a thread. "Ms. Banks," Thorne said, his voice cracking slightly. "I am so sorry. I came as soon as I got your message. Are you all right? Has he touched you again?" Sterling froze. He looked from Thorne to Vivian and then back to Thorne. He recognized Thorne. He was the big boss, the guy who signed the checks for the pilots. Why was the VP of Operations apologizing to the hood rat in 1A? "I'm fine, David," Vivian said, finally unbuckling her seatbelt. She stood up. She wasn't tall, but in that moment she seemed to tower over everyone in the cabin. She smoothed down her hoodie. "Though I must say," Vivian continued, her voice projecting clearly through the silent cabin, "the service on this flight was appalling, and the leadership, catastrophic." Sterling stammered. "Mr. Thorne, sir, I don't understand. This woman—" "Shut your mouth, Richard," Thorne hissed, turning on him with a fury that made Sterling flinch. "You have absolutely no idea what you've done." The realization hit Captain Richard Sterling like a physical blow to the gut. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin a sickly shade of gray. He looked at the girl in the sweatshirt. He looked at the confidence in her stance. He remembered the name on the manifest he had laughed at. Vivian Banks. Obsidian Capital. The new owners. "You," Sterling whispered. "I'm the woman who pays your salary, Captain," Vivian said. She stepped out into the aisle, standing toe-to-toe with him. Or rather, I was. "Now wait a minute," Sterling said, trying to summon his bluster, though his hands were shaking. "I didn't know. You were dressed like you were in the wrong line. I was just following protocol. I was protecting the brand." "Protecting the brand?" Vivian laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "You humiliated a paying customer at the gate. You profiled me based on my clothes and my race. You harassed me on the plane. You fabricated safety violations. And then, the cherry on top, you wasted police resources because your ego couldn't handle a woman telling you no." She turned to the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this scene. My name is Vivian Banks, and my firm acquired this airline this morning. I wanted to fly quietly today to see how this company operates when they think management isn't watching." She turned back to Sterling. Her eyes were hard as diamonds. "And I saw exactly how it operates." "Ms. Banks, please," Sterling pleaded. He looked around. The passengers were filming. Phones were raised like a firing squad. This was going live. "I've given 30 years to this company. I'm 2 years away from retirement. You can't just—" "You called the police on me, Richard," Vivian said softly. "You wanted me arrested. You wanted me dragged off this plane in handcuffs to teach me a lesson. Well, I'm here. I'm listening. What's the lesson?" Sterling opened his mouth, but no words came out. Vivian turned to David Thorne. "David, is the replacement crew ready?" "Yes, ma'am," Thorne said instantly. "We have a reserve captain waiting at the gate to take the aircraft for the return leg." "Good," Vivian said. She pointed at Sterling. "Captain Sterling is relieved of duty immediately. Escort him off the aircraft. Confiscate his badge and his ID. He is suspended without pay, pending a formal investigation into gross misconduct and discrimination." "You can't do this!" Sterling shouted, panic setting in. "I have a union. I have rights." "And I have the recording," Vivian said, holding up her phone. "I recorded your little speech in the cockpit. The one where you called me a ghetto hood rat. Do you think your union is going to protect you when I play that for the press?" The silence that followed was absolute. Sterling looked at the phone as if it were a loaded gun. "Get him off my plane," Vivian ordered. Sergeant Miller nodded. He placed a hand on Sterling's shoulder, firmly this time. "Let's go, Captain. Don't make a scene." Sterling, the man who had strutted through the terminal like a king only 5 hours ago, slumped. His posture collapsed. He looked old, tired, and defeated. He walked down the aisle, past the passengers he had tried to impress. Mr. Henderson, the man in 1B, caught Sterling's eye as he passed. "Shame on you, Richard," Henderson said quietly. Sterling looked down at his feet. As he was led off the jet bridge, the economy cabin, who had heard everything, erupted into applause. It started slow, then grew louder. People were cheering. Someone shouted, "Bye, Karen." Vivian didn't smile. She just watched him go. She turned to David Thorne. "David, we have a lot of work to do. But first, I want to apologize to the crew." She looked at Maria, the flight attendant who had tried to warn Sterling. Maria was standing in the galley, looking terrified that she was next. Vivian walked over to her. She took Maria's hand. "You tried to stop him," Vivian said. "I heard you. You stood up for me when you thought I was just a nobody. You have integrity." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Ms. Banks. I should have done more." "You did enough," Vivian said. "David, give Maria a commendation and a raise. She's the kind of leadership we need here." Vivian grabbed her tote bag. She walked to the door of the plane, stopped, and looked back at the empty cockpit. "Clean that out," she said to Thorne. "It smells like arrogance." The walk from the jet bridge to the curb of Los Angeles International Airport is one of the longest walks a pilot can take when he is not wearing his badge. For 30 years, Captain Richard Sterling had walked through terminals like a god. He was used to the admiring glances, the nod of respect from TSA agents, the way crowds parted for his uniform. But today, stripped of his ID, his epaulets removed and shoved into his pocket by David Thorne's security team, he was just an old man in a wrinkled white shirt, carrying a flight bag that suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He didn't take the crew shuttle. He couldn't bear to face the other pilots. He called a ride-share, standing awkwardly at the curb, hiding his face from the passers-by. His phone buzzed. It was his wife, Linda. Sterling stared at the screen. Linda was expecting him to be at the hotel, getting ready for a dinner with the crew. She didn't know he was standing on the curb, fired, or at least suspended, and disgraced. He let it go to voicemail. He needed a narrative before he spoke to her. He needed to spin this. "It's a misunderstanding," he told himself as he climbed into the back of a smelling sedan. Just a power-tripping new owner trying to make a statement. "The union will fix this. Greg will fix this. I'm a senior captain. They can't touch me." But by the time he got to his house in the suburbs, he had taken a flight back home immediately on a competitor airline, paying cash. The delusion began to crack. He walked into his living room. The TV was on. Linda was sitting on the couch, her hand covering her mouth. "Richard," she whispered, standing up. She looked at him with eyes wide with horror. "Linda, listen. I'm home early because—" "Richard, tell me it's not true," she interrupted, pointing at the television. On the screen, a local news anchor was speaking gravely. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, "Viral video. Horizon Apex pilot attempts to remove airline owner from flight." The footage was shaky, clearly filmed by the kid in the economy line back at JFK. It showed Sterling looming over Vivian, his finger in her face. It showed him blocking the scanner. The audio was crisp. "I don't need to check a manifest to know a liar when I see one. You belong in the back." "That's out of context," Sterling shouted at the TV, his face flushing red. "She provoked me. She was dressed like a vagrant, Linda. She trapped me." "Trapped you?" Linda's voice trembled. "Richard, look at the comments." She held up her iPad. Twitter was trending with his name. Not just Captain Sterling, but Airlines, the pilot Karen. Fly High 99. "I flew with this guy last year. He yelled at a mum for taking too long to fold a stroller. Guy is a menace. Glad he finally messed with the wrong one." Avgikle. "Imagine being so arrogant you try to kick your own boss off the plane. Career over." Justice Watch. Horizon Apex stocks are actually UP since the news broke that the new owner Vivian Banks handled this. The market loves a strong leader. The pilot is toast. Sterling sank into his armchair. "It doesn't matter what the internet says," he muttered, trying to convince himself. "I have a contract. I have a pension. They can suspend me for a week, maybe dock my pay, but they can't fire me. I know where the bodies are buried." He spent the next 48 hours in a state of manic denial. He called the scheduling department. His access code was invalid. He tried to log into the pilot's portal to check his 401k. Access denied. Then the phone call came. It wasn't the airline. It was Greg, his union representative. Greg was a bulldog, a man who had saved Sterling's job twice before when he had personality conflicts with co-pilots. "Greg," Sterling exhaled, clutching the phone. "Thank God. Look, this whole thing is a setup. She baited me. We need to file a grievance for hostile work environment. We need to sue for defamation." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Richard," Greg said. His voice wasn't fighting mad, it was tired. "There isn't going to be a grievance." "What are you talking about? I pay my dues." "I just came from a preliminary meeting with Vivian Banks and her legal team," Greg said. "Richard, they have the cockpit voice recording, not just the interaction in the cabin. The stuff you said to Kevin inside the flight deck." Sterling's blood ran cold. He remembered the jokes, the "hood rat" comment, the sneering remarks about people like her ruining the neighborhood. "It was private conversation," Sterling stammered. "Expectation of privacy." "Not on a recorded flight deck, there isn't," Greg snapped. "You violated the zero-tolerance hate speech clause in the master agreement. If I try to defend you, the union looks like we support bigots. I can't do it, Richard. I won't do it. You're on your own." The line went dead. 3 days later, Richard Sterling walked into the Horizon Apex headquarters in Seattle. He had to sign in as a visitor. The receptionist, a woman he had walked past without acknowledging for 10 years, looked at him with a mix of pity and disdain. "Boardroom B," she said curtly. Inside, the room was freezing. The long mahogany table was empty, except for 3 people at the far end. Vivian Banks sat in the center. She looked impeccable. The hoodie was gone, replaced by a navy power suit that screamed authority. To her right was David Thorne, the VP of Operations, looking pale and shaken. To her left was a lawyer Sterling didn't recognize, a shark-like man with cold eyes. There was no union rep. There was no friendly face. "Sit down," Vivian said. She didn't offer him water. Sterling sat. He tried to muster some of his old bluster. "Ms. Banks, I think we've all had a few days to cool off. I'm prepared to offer a formal apology for the misunderstanding at the gate. I'm willing to take a retraining course on sensitivity." Vivian didn't blink. She pressed a button on the laptop in front of her. A voice filled the room. It was Sterling's voice, clear as day, recorded from the cockpit microphones. "Ghetto hood rat gets a lucky upgrade and thinks she owns the place. I'm going to have law enforcement meet us. Show her who runs things." Sterling flinched as if he'd been slapped. Vivian stopped the recording. She leaned forward, clasping her hands. "That wasn't a misunderstanding, Richard. That was hate, pure and simple. You looked at a black woman in a hoodie, and you decided she was beneath you. You decided she was a criminal. You decided to weaponize the police, to humiliate her." "I was protecting the airline," Sterling blurted out, desperation taking over. "I didn't know it was you. If I had known—" "That is exactly the point," Vivian said softly. "If you had known I was powerful, you would have treated me with respect. But because you thought I was powerless, you treated me like garbage. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. And I do not employ people with your character." The lawyer slid a thick document across the table. "This is your notice of termination for cause," the lawyer said. "Effective immediately." Sterling grabbed the paper. His hands were shaking so hard he almost ripped it. He scanned the legal jargon until his eyes landed on the paragraph about benefits. "Wait," Sterling gasped. "Wait a minute. My pension. I'm 18 months away from full vesting. If you fire me for cause, I lose the company match. I lose the lifetime medical." "Read Clause 14, Section B," David Thorne said, his voice quiet. "Any employee terminated for gross misconduct involving violation of civil rights or hate speech forfeits all non-vested benefits and future company contributions." "You can't do this," Sterling whispered. Tears welled up in his eyes. Not tears of remorse, but tears of a man watching his future evaporate. "I have a mortgage. I have 2 kids in college. This is millions of dollars." "You should have thought about that before you decided to play God at Gate B32, Vivian said. Sterling slammed his hand on the table. "I flew for this company for 30 years. I flew through storms. I missed Christmases. You owe me." Vivian stood up. The movement was so sharp that Sterling recoiled. "We owed you a salary for a job done professionally," she said, her voice ice-cold. "We did not owe you a platform for your bigotry. You bankrupted your own legacy, Richard. Nobody else did this. You did." She pointed to the door. "Get out of my building. And Richard, I've circulated your file to the FAA and the pilot hiring boards of every major carrier. I wouldn't bother applying to Delta or United. They've all seen the video." Sterling stood up. He looked at David Thorne, his old drinking buddy. David looked away. He looked at Vivian. She held his gaze, unyielding. He turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him, a sound that felt like the lid of a coffin closing. The karma didn't stop at the termination. Real life rarely wraps up that neatly. It drags on. 2 months later, the bank foreclosed on Sterling's summer home in Florida. Without his pilot's salary, which had been nearly $300,000 a year, he couldn't sustain the lifestyle he had built on credit. He tried to sue. He hired a cheap lawyer because the good ones wouldn't take his case. The lawsuit was dismissed in summary judgment within weeks. The judge, a stern woman who had clearly seen the video, wrote in her opinion that Horizon Apex acted well within its rights to protect its passengers and its reputation from egregious misconduct. The legal fees drained his savings. 6 months later, Linda left him. She couldn't handle the shame. She couldn't go to the grocery store without people whispering. She couldn't handle his anger, his constant ranting about how he was the victim, how the world had gone soft. She moved in with her sister in Arizona. Richard Sterling, the captain, the king of the air, was alone. He applied for jobs. He applied to regional airlines. He applied to cargo carriers. He even applied to a flight school to be an instructor. The interview at the flight school was the final nail. The owner, a young guy in his 30s, looked at Sterling's resume and then looked up at him. "You're Richard Sterling?" the owner asked. "The guy from the viral video?" "That was a misunderstanding," Sterling said automatically. "Yeah," the owner said, sliding the resume back. "We have a lot of international students here. Diverse group. I don't think you're a good fit for our culture. Thanks for coming in." Vivian Banks sat in seat 1A, Yahoo of Flight 881 from JFK to LAX. The plane was brand new. The interior had been redesigned. The mood was lighter. The flight attendants were smiling, genuinely smiling, not the forced rictus of fear they used to wear around Sterling. Maria, now the chief purser, walked by with a pot of coffee. "Good morning, Ms. Banks," Maria said warmly. "We're ready for pushback. Captain Miller says smooth skies ahead." "Thank you, Maria." Vivian smiled. She looked out the window. Below on the tarmac, the baggage handlers were loading the final suitcases. Far away, in a different city, in a massive, fluorescent-lit warehouse store, a man in an orange vest stood by the exit door. "Receipt, please," the man droned. "Check your receipt." He looked tired. His hair was thinning. He wore a name tag that just said, "Richard." A customer, a young woman in a hoodie, pushed her cart past him. She didn't have her receipt ready. "Miss, I need to see the receipt," Richard snapped, a flash of his old irritation surfacing. The woman stopped. She looked him in the eye. "It's right here," she said, holding it up. "You don't have to be rude." Richard Sterling froze. For a second, he wanted to yell. He wanted to tell her he used to fly Boeing 717s. He wanted to tell her he used to be a god. But he looked at the manager watching him from the service desk. He remembered the empty house. He remembered the bank account that was hovering near zero. He swallowed his pride. It tasted like ash. "Have a nice day," he muttered, marking the receipt with a highlighter. He watched her walk away. Through the automatic doors, he could see a plane taking off in the distance, climbing higher and higher into the blue, leaving him stuck on the ground, exactly where he belonged. And that, my friends, is the story of Captain Richard Sterling. It's a brutal reminder that arrogance is a loan you take out against your future, and eventually, life comes to collect with interest. Sterling thought his uniform made him superior. He thought his title gave him the right to judge Vivian based on her appearance. But he forgot the golden rule of the modern world. You never know who you are dealing with. The woman he tried to shame wasn't just a passenger. She was his fate. It's satisfying to see justice served, but it's also a tragedy of his own making. He had everything, a career, a family, respect, and he threw it all away because he couldn't let go of his prejudice. Vivian Banks didn't destroy him. She just held up a mirror, and he couldn't survive what he saw in the reflection. I want to know what you think. Was the punishment too harsh? Should he have lost his pension, or was that fair game for the way he acted? If you were Vivian, would you have given him a second chance? Let's get a debate going in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying drama and instant karma, please destroy that like button. It really helps the YouTube algorithm show this story to more people. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We upload every week. Thanks for watching. Stay humble and fly safe. I'll see you in the next one.